Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Perfect, perfect.
How's it
All right,
going?
I'm good, man. I don't know where Jeff is. He asked me. He said he was like mad about I was gonna be here at 1:15, and then
He's bailing.
he's no. He said, oh, just 1 minute ago, he said he's pulling in, so he'll be here.
Sweet.
Yeah,
This looks
yeah.
like sorry.
No, we record out of my basement, so yeah. I imagine he was coming from downtown and everything. So anyway,
Nice.
but yeah.
Love your setup down there. It's awesome.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's I just converted like one of our like our home office into I teach at the University of Utah, and so I soundproofed it for my kids because they're all over the place, and then yeah, and then we got a few posters for the podcast and hung them up. So yeah.
Nice. I'm
Yeah.
I'm holed up in my kids' playroom, just surrounded by Lego and toys right now. So it's
There you go. That's the way to do it. Awesome. Yeah, well, he should be walking. I can hear my dogs barking, so he should be walking in any minute now.
yeah, no worries.
Cool.
Have you guys been using Zoom for your episodes with guests and stuff, or?
No, we haven't. For the last little while, we haven't had. Well, actually, I guess I shouldn't say that. We've had a couple of guests. Our there's Jeff now. We've had we interviewed a former client, and I think since we started recording without Justin, how many other guests have we had? Just Derek?
I think just Derek.
Oh, okay.
I can't think of anybody that no, we haven't. It's just been Derek.
And then we we invited
the Cincinnati people.
Oh, that's right. And in both of those cases, we actually recorded off site. We went to like the sheriff's the correctional facility, and then we did the other one out of our office.
Nice.
That's right.
Yeah.
The gruesome Newsome.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Jamie the gruesome Newsome.
Yeah.
She'll be she's coming back in July. She's gonna do another podcast with us then.
Beautiful.
Too.
Glad that nickname's spreading.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so weird. I've been listening to your guys' show for a couple of years, and then just to see you and talk to you and have this opportunity is pretty cool.
Right on, man.
Do we look like what we sound like?
I thought Mace, I thought you were Jeff, and I thought it was reversed here. So it's tripping me out a little bit, but
you thought the deep voice went with the big muscly guy.
Yeah. And the high pitch annoying voice went with the ginger.
I knew that was coming.
That makes sense. Well, we bag on each other both. Yeah. Either way, that works itself out.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. So what's going on in Utah? It's you guys Jazz fans, or?
I mean, I'm not really a basketball fan, but if you're going to make me pick a team, yeah, Jazz fan for sure. I'm still a little hard up. I have some heartache over the 1997.
Don't even talk about it.
I know, bro.
Don't even talk where Jordan pushed off.
Yeah, when Jordan pushed off of Brian Russell.
So Matt, this is like a Utah. This is like a Utah. Not a legend, like a lore or
infamous, or yeah.
What's the opposite of legend? Like something that is perpetually held in time, but is held in infamy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What's the opposite?
I don't know. It's just it's like 9/11 basically.
I don't know if it's quite like 9/11. But yeah, no.
A lot of hearts broken though.
Yeah, and you can see it. Have you watched that documentary? It's called The Last Dance. It's about the
so good.
So Jordan talks about that, where he pushed off Brian Russell big time. And look, here's the thing though, is like leading up to that, we were in high school at this point. Like I was a junior in high school, I think, or maybe a sophomore. But it was just traumatic because up until that point, like we get out these things every year, and it would say, this is our year, this is our year. And then finally I was like, oh, no, this really is our year. We have like the best team ever. And then that happened, and I was like, oh no. And I remember it was particularly traumatic for me because my dad took a dumbbell, a weighted dumbbell, and threw it through our TV. And I was like mortified. I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. That was
he really did that?
Oh yeah, he did that. And I would have had to have been a freshman, if not before that. He threw it through it. And I was like, so that's ever imprinted in my mind. And so ever since then, I've been like a half fan of the Jazz.
Yeah.
Like it's too dangerous to fully commit emotionally.
Just kind of there. Yeah.
When the mailman missed that crucial free throw, I forget what game 3.
Memory, man.
Yeah. That was just disappointing altogether, that whole series. So
are you a Jazz fan? Or you just have like an insane recall of...
I am right now, to be honest, because the Raptors are not playing, and I really want to see them crush Kawhi Leonard because, well, you guys know if you followed the Raptors at all, that he helped us win a big championship a couple years ago, and then he just jumped ship over to the Clippers. So I just want to see him
for a little bit of
vengeance. So
vengeance.
Yeah, that's always good. I like to be motivated by revenge. That basically fuels my entire life.
That's healthy.
But you guys up in Canada, you guys are more like the big hockey fans, right?
For sure. And we just had a devastating blow with the Leafs. Leafs are up 3-1 against Montreal, and then they just completely shit the bed and lost in Game 7. And so it was an early exit for Toronto fans.
Man, so you'd think being up 3-1, you'd have it in the bag.
That's what you would think. But when you've been a Leafs fan for a long time, you don't hold your breath anymore because it's just
you just know disappointment's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. There's one of my favorite quotes of all time was stolen by a hockey player. So that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Mm-hmm. Yeah, people think that's Wayne Gretzky. That's actually Lee Harvey Oswald. So,
I thought that was a Michael Scott quote.
Yeah. I love Lee Harvey Oswald. Dude, I'll tell that joke sometimes with students, and they're like, "Oh," I'm like, "Too soon?" Like,
well, you've already said something worse than I did with the 9/11 joke, so
yeah. Now we're even. We evened it out.
Enough.
All right, sweet.
You guys are no stranger to maybe the controversy. Do you ever get any feedback on the show, like crossing lines or people hurt on things, or does that ever happen?
Not really. Kind of early on in getting guerrilla social work off the ground, we sort of had some like sort of loose rules around like what we'd talk about. We basically just limited it down to that you're not going to really catch us saying the F word, but like beyond that, we kind of just say whatever, and nothing's really come back on us.
Or I suppose the C word, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
F word and up.
Yeah. F word and beyond. But other than that, it's kind of the whole part. I think the only thing that we got feedback on was I think we were talking about that there was that study that fake study that was sent out. It was it spawned the Dear Colleague letter or whatever. It was the one where they said that 1 in 4 women who attend university will be victims of sexual assault. Like the methodology behind that, if you remember, was like basically they sent out a survey and asked, has this happened? Has that happened? And the researchers identified what had happened to them as sexual assault or not sexual assault. So obviously, like the methodology behind it was a little, I mean, you
end up with bigger numbers.
Right. So the 1 in 4, which seemed kind of astronomical, I think we just talked about some counter arguments to that. Not that we were making the counter argument to it, and I think I don't know. I think they're a fan. I just am going to assume that they're a fan, and they said, yeah, the way you guys talked about that wasn't great. But aside from that, we haven't really gotten anything but pretty good feedback.
Yeah.
Except for except for the people who like us and they give us good feedback and then they give us 4 stars. Like, dude,
What a dick.
take those. Yeah, just don't even rate us at that point. Yeah. Keep
What
those
about
4
you?
stars.
Have you been as cancel culture come your way at all?
I've been fairly paranoid about that, so I've kept it pretty PG so far.
Yeah.
But I just listening to you guys, I love how free you guys talk, and you're obviously buddies, so that's kind of nice. And that's one of the fallbacks of just being a single host is there's not that banter to have. So that's partly why I like listening to you guys and just hearing the camaraderie. And you know, it's kind of nice to hear male social workers too. I have 0 friends in the field. Like guy friends, right? So I don't get to do this kind of like talk about work and sort of be on the same level. The closest I have is a buddy that's a PO. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to shooting the breeze with you guys and learning about what you do, because it sounds like you guys have an awesome practice going in Utah.
Well, yeah, appreciate that, man. And yeah, it is nice being friends to be able to do this, because I don't know, it doesn't feel stiff, you know, or just kind of this stilted conversation. You know, we've like, you know, talk shit back and forth a little bit. Plus we have things, you know, similar experiences, and then, you know, working under the banner of the same company definitely helps with that as well. And yeah, flying solo like yourself, you kind of have to be on the whole time. There's times where I'll get, you know, maybe 2 minutes into a monologue and then my brain's got to rest. I'm like, Mace, pick up the baton and run, dude. I got to think for a minute.
Yeah, Jeff, I think does a good job balancing, because I never shut up ever. Like I get into, Jeff and I present together quite a bit too, and we'll do trainings together as well. And a lot of times I'm like, all right, dude, you gotta interrupt me, because I just will go. I've never, you know, that whole skill of learning to be comfortable with silence. They talk about that as being a therapist. I was like, nah, I'm good. I'm not gonna, it's like, I remember somebody said, yeah, wait like a 7 second, give it 7 beats before you fill that gap.
Oh, that's a long time.
I know. I'm like 1.5, and I'm like, okay, so which I don't know if that makes me horrible, but man, it's rough. So it's a good balance. We appreciate that. That's awesome.
How do you guys know each other?
Well, we went to high school together. I'm a year ahead of him, and we were, I mean,
shout out to Ogden High.
Yeah, that's right.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
Home of Buddy Ravel.
And then like after high school, a couple years go by, and then as we're all in college, a bunch of us ended up living in the same apartment buildings, and
which was bonkers.
Tons of adventures, just ruining that place.
Yeah. I'm amazed that they
Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah, that was an awesome. So we lived in apartments that were across a hallway from one another, and I mean, wackiness ensued. Everything that you can imagine 6 bachelors doing in their free time in college, you know, we did, and then some. I'm often amazed, like when we have, you know, a few colleagues that we do things with every now and then. We tell them stories about, you know, stuff as we were growing up, and we'll tell them these stories, and they're like, "How come you guys aren't in prison?" Like, that's a good question, man. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah,
luck.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, as you guys are in college, are you all in the social work program, or that kind of came later?
It came later. I mean, Mason.
Were you a sociology major?
Yeah, I was.
Then you were like, wow, I can do nothing with this.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So Mace he got a job working at a group home as line staff, and I was kind of on my own parallel path. I was working at the halfway house that we all work at now, and also working for like a diabetes and endocrinology clinic, helping like mental health and physical exercise with diabetic folks. And Mace was going through grad school at the time, and was needing to do a research project, and some of the interventions in like combining physical fitness and mental health, Mason and I have been spitballing some ideas about it, and he convinced me to come apply to work at the group home he was working at, and in going in on his research project, and then kind of from there it just took off.
Yeah, and then wackiness ensued.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Is this a group home like with youth, kind of violent?
That's right.
Juvenile sex offenders. Yeah.
Okay. That's how I got my start as well, working in group homes with violent offenders as well. Not so much sexual offenders, but just sort of generalized offenders of different crimes and substance abuse, mental health issues. So I think it's the best way to get started in the field.
Did you get started as line staff working on that?
Is it more of like a child and youth work position? So
man, that's a grind. If you can hack it working at a place like that, you can do about anything else in social work. I mean, that's a true test, and you'll have every curveball thrown at you, and like stuff that you'd never get in an educational setting or just a private outpatient clinic. Like shit's wild in those group homes.
Yeah,
I know.
I think it
100%.
teaches you. I think it teaches you whether or not you can hack it, like working with this population. Although that job, being a line staff, and then I was promoted pretty quickly, and then became a therapist. I went to school. I was going to be an attorney, and then I had to be part of a murder trial. And ever since then, I was like, oh yeah, attorneys are scumbags. I can't do that. So then I went back and started working in social work. So no offense against attorneys, by the way, but except for the jerk ones. So, but yeah, that was one of the funnest jobs I've ever had. Burger King were like, those were fun jobs, man. Those were a riot. Those were hilarious.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when I was, sorry, you go, Jeff.
I was just going to ask you how long did you work in that group home?
So I did that kind of the end of my undergrad. I was living with 4 buddies going to university, and all my roommates were in accounting, finance, like totally separate from the psychology world that I was doing. So I'd go work in the group homes. I did it for a couple years, and not always with them, but come home and they'd be like, oh, what happened today? Like, tell us some crazy stories. My first day on the job, getting a brick thrown at me, one weekend, the first time a kid tried to stab me with a protractor.
It's good to hear that things are about the same kind of Canada, US, like wherever.
There's lunatics everywhere. Yeah,
get a brick thrown at you and stabbed with a protractor. Yeah, that's sounds about right, man.
Yeah, there was I listened to a podcast it's called Canadian True Crime, and it was a recommendation, I think, from another podcast that I like. And anyway, I just listened to it and I was like, Canadian true crime. I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be pretty tame, but it's like just as gnarly as here. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. It's not that different.
They get after it in the Great White North.
Yeah, it seems like I don't know if things calm down when it's like really cold, which seems weird. Like like you got to be in the mood for murder,
Supposed to, right?
Yeah.
The crime goes up in the heat.
It's nice and warm. Let's get some mood.
Let's get to smoking, folks. It's 100 degrees.
Yeah. I worked when I finished my master's. My wife and I moved up to the Yukon, which is like pretty north in Canada. I don't know how good your geography is, but like north of BC. And
Yukon sounds north and cold.
It does,
It is. And it's like 8 months basically of winter. Like by mid-May, things are starting to kind of warm up a bit. And then, middle of July, it's 20 hours of sunlight. So I think the crime, like it compensates itself because there's so much
sunlight.
Yeah, like daylight. Like
how far north they are.
Yeah, we'd be out camping. I'd be, fishing in the canoe at 2 a.m, and it looks like it's, 7 o'clock at night.
Wow.
So I think the crime sort of like the winter they hibernate, and then when there's that 20 hours of light, it's like let's go.
Yeah.
Criminals hibernate.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Dang, man.
So where are you now?
I'm in Sarnia. It's right across the bridge from Michigan.
Okay.
Well, not too. Yeah, from Port Huron is kind of the closest city.
Okay.
in the States. So we're not too far from Detroit.
Okay.
Ah,
Have you ever been to Canada before?
nope.
Oh, okay. I've only gone once, and it was in I think Toronto is where I went.
Hmm.
Is that near you? Is that
I'm
near
like
you, New York?
2 hours south of Toronto.
Okay. Is Toronto kind of close to the Niagara Falls?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, you got it.
That's where I went. And I noticed one thing, and so I don't know how much we talk about this, but I'm like a candy freak, Matt. So everywhere we go, like this always annoys Jeff. We'll be rolling into a city for whatever reasons, and I'll always be like, "Hey, we got to stop at the gas station." He's like, "For what?" I was like, "I got to get candy, bro." He's like, "I'm just a candy fiend." And in Canada, the candy, it's like they don't have big bags of candy. Everything is like, at least in Toronto, I noticed all the candy bags were small, and I was like, dude, Americans suck so bad.
I was gonna say that's because we're all fat
I know,
asses here,
which is
dude.
fine, but I'm just like, I had to buy like several bags of candy to satiate my.
Like everywhere else understands portion control.
No. Yeah, I want the 5-pound bag.
Probably a Canadian thing, but and it's changed because of COVID probably. But back in the day, you used to be able to go buy like individual candies, like 1 cent, 5 cents.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah, I remember
Oh, like a
that.
penny
have that?
machine. Yeah.
Yeah, we had that back at it was Jun Lee's market that was over.
That's
Remember
right.
that? And then that guy
Yeah.
got shut down because he had the bomb egg rolls though, and then he got shut down because he was selling
Selling beer.
cigarettes to kids.
But it's beer sick. Yeah. Anyway.
Both
so, yeah.
probably, and then
Yeah.
probably then some too.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That's where I got it.
Yeah, that was always fun back in the day.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of COVID in Canada, are you guys still pretty locked down up there?
Yeah. People are calling, because we live in Ontario, people are calling it Ontariable because up until about a week and a half ago, we couldn't even go golfing.
Really?
We were the only place in the world, the only province, the only living place that it was illegal to go golfing.
Yeah, I heard some crazy stuff. Like if you fly in there, you have to quarantine for 14 days. Then you have to run an obstacle course, get a COVID test, turn it in underwater without getting it wet.
Yeah.
And then
Pretty much it.
So, I mean, obviously I'm embellishing, but it sounds pretty restrictive. Do you guys have any light at the end of the tunnel up there?
Yeah, I think they're doing this tiered system based on how many people are vaccinated. So we've been really lagging with our vaccines compared to you guys. So we're hoping by midsummer to be kind of back to restaurants open, gyms open. Like it's been illegal to get a haircut for months.
Illegal?
What happens? What happens if you violate that law? If you get a haircut, what happens to you?
On paper, you'll get an $800 fine.
Oh.
But I have not heard of anybody actually getting that for getting a haircut.
Okay.
But there's a lot of fear tactics right now, and
Yeah.
just gyms being closed, huge fines for people defying the rules, like thousands of dollar fines.
Oh, that sucks.
I wonder how much those fines are enforced. It'd be so much more effective that like to broker a deal with the salons, and just like somebody comes in for a haircut, just give them the shittiest haircut ever, like mess their head up, like I'm like, yeah, see,
Yeah.
Follow the
This
rules.
is what happens.
Follow the rules, eh? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like that'd be or if you go to the gym, like I don't know, how would you get somebody to the gym in a practical way? Like as they're walking in. I don't know.
I'll
Yeah.
have to come back to that
Give
one.
them an injury.
Throw a
of some-
dumbbell at them.
Yeah.
There you go.
hopefully not
Like
through the
Mace's
TV.
dad through the TV.
Yeah.
Dang.
But things are good with you guys though in Utah. You guys wide open, back to kind of a normal, or?
I don't think we ever really shut down.
Utah's like,
I mean,
it's
There was like a
stayed one of-
2-week period there where things were kind of,
Yeah.
but then after that it was,
I mean, restaurants shut down and the gyms
Yeah.
did for a minute.
Yeah, that's true.
I built a home gym real quick just to kind of get by, but
that was max a month though.
yeah,
And then I was back in the gym. Yeah.
Hmm.
Sweating all
Utah
over
stayed
everybody.
really
Yeah.
open quite a bit. Like, and I mean, some people hate that. I honestly loved that we stayed more open than other places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys have the same vaccines up there then, Matt?
I think so. We got the Moderna, the Pfizer, the AstraZeneca, but I think that's kind of the main ones.
You don't have the Sputnik vaccine?
No, not yet. Is that coming?
No, that's the one that's in Russia. I love
okay.
that. Yeah. Remember how we talked about?
Yeah,
they called it Sputnik. I'm like, yeah,
scoreboard.
we got it.
Yeah.
You got to space.
You
first.
beat us to space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey.
Oh, that's
Things are decent though, man.
Yeah.
You don't see us wearing masks right now.
What's that?
You don't see Mason and I wearing masks right now.
Yeah.
No, we are less than 6 feet apart.
Yeah. It was kind of crazy. This is how like exposed we were in June of 2020 when things were red hot, right? Everything was red hot. Jeff came to a birthday party over at my house, and had just rolled with so Jeff's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and he was at Westside Academy. Shout out to Westside. And he had just rolled with a bunch of mongrels and literally got their sweat in his mouth and all over his face. One of which reported to him later on that day that he had tested positive for COVID, right?
Yeah.
And then he was over at my house, and of course me and him made out. Kidding, but like, I mean, we were just right next to each other, and no mask, no nothing, and everybody was fine. Everything was fine. So we dodged some bullets, I suppose. Yeah.
I was worried that I would have killed somebody's grandma at his family's party. Like,
oh
man,
my fingers were crossed.
Yeah.
Inheritance, baby.
Yeah. Dang.
Well, yeah, like I don't know, should we have a bit of a serious talk for a couple minutes? And
absolutely.
You had
questions.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
Yeah.
Okay, because there's stuff I really want to learn from you guys too. I re-listened to that your episode about porn, so got a few things out of that I would love to bring up. But today's we're going to talk about forensic psychotherapy. And I know you guys work with a lot of different types of offenders, but if we can, just kind of focusing on sexual offenders.
Sure. And
talking a little bit about treatment and therapy, because I think that's a really interesting topic. Maybe to start off, can you talk a little bit about Alpha Counseling? What you guys are all about, who you service, where you're at, a little bit of the ins and outs.
Yeah, so Alpha's the largest provider in Utah for forensic psychotherapy and justice involved clients. So really what we define that as is anybody who's involved in the criminal justice system, and this is for adults, and anybody who's criminally involved and also usually mandated to treatment for that criminal involvement. So our specialty is working with adult sex offenders and those who have been convicted of a sexual offense and have been court mandated to seek treatment. And then also the other specialty that we focus on is substance use. So those, obviously with the substance use disorder, there's a lot of cross sections with the criminal justice system, obviously. And so that's, but our big emphasis is providing cognitive behavioral therapy services to anybody who is dealing with the criminal type behaviors, any type of criminogenic risk, and kind of treating those. So did I miss anything there?
No, that's about right.
Kind of it.
Is that what you wanted to know?
Yeah. And you guys do group and individual counseling. That's the case, right?
Oh yeah,
that's right.
Yep.
Yeah, our groups are psychoeducational in nature, and individual therapy follows like a set of parameters that were set forth by the Sex Offender Task Force. I'm one of the board members on the task force. So it's been kind of nice being able to sort of see behind the curtain a little. But yeah, there, at least with the sex offense population, there's kind of some guidelines that any treatment provider that's serving clients convicted of a sex offense has to follow. And that's, I don't know how interested you are in the guidelines, but it's like kind of a minimum of 18 months in the program, a client, start to finish. And while they're in the program, the idea is to assess where their risk is. We can get into risk assessment if you want at some point. And then of course, through through the course of treatment, specifically identify risk factors specific to the client and respond in a way to lower that, again, based on sort of their top presenting risk factors. And, you know, we have a slew of methods for doing that and ways of getting like kind of outside verification of compliance, you know, polygraphs and things like that. And, you know, before, again, I'm real general with you, man, but like before a client is given a high five and told to have a nice life, we make sure that they're low risk for a period of 90 days minimum, and as far as like the changeable risk factors, and, you know, pass an exit polygraph to show that they've been acting in accordance to what they've been saying, and then off they go. That's a
yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, prior to being a therapist, I was in child protection. And so obviously working with sexual offenders, looking at risk from the child's perspective, but sometimes in unique situations, we could apply for special needs funding. And I remember one client, we got funding to send him to do a phallometric test. I had no idea what that was. And the idea of it is still sort of hard to wrap my head around. We don't do polygraphs.
Do you hear the play on words there?
No pun intended. But he came, you know, this is just one case, but he came back with no like distinguishable preference of attraction. I don't know if I'm wording that right, but basically he was attracted to elderly women and men and prepubescent boys and girls.
That's a pretty risky dude.
Yeah. So it was sort of eye-opening. Is that something that you guys do, phallometric testing? Or
so yeah, we so Jeff and I were actually trained on that. That's a really funny story if we ever have time to talk about that again.
Yeah.
Getting trained in that. And so I don't know how it is in Canada, but in Utah, so there's some rules that kind of govern how that test is conducted, and it at least in my opinion limits the validity of the test itself. And so, you know, so essentially what they're doing is you put what's called an idiom gallum gauge around a person's penis, and then you're measuring blood flow beyond to their penis, which could only be explained by arousal. And that gauge is intended to measure that. Now, there's two kind of triggering mechanisms that are going through this. So one is that they're listening to a script, and the script is essentially just a guy telling you a story. So it's like him, you know, talking about a fantasy, talking about the identified other individual that's part of this. And then also you are supposed to see a visual prompt as well that's on this, and but because of the limitations in Utah, they don't allow for the visual prompts, so you only have the audio. And there's some controls that kind of help us determine whether or not a client is paying attention or not. So they have a breathing gauge, which, you know, if they're doing some really weird breathing. And also there's a button gauge, which is basically measuring, there's a series of beeps throughout the script that the client needs to press the button. And it's usually one, if it's like a cooperative scenario, and then two, if it's more of a forceful scenario. And then the other one is they have the galvanic skin response that's on their fingers, all of which is trying to measure, you know, are they trying to use countermeasures to offset, or they call it response interference, that to make sure that they're paying attention to this. And my criticism of that, I suppose, would be that without the visual response, it becomes difficult. But then the other thing, and I don't know if you noticed this, but like if you listened to, so I listened to, Jeff and I used to play this game where we'd give the first line of the script and then the other person would have to guess it. And Jeff got really good at it.
Unfortunately.
So, yeah, hundreds of PPGs later. But the one that was like the adult appropriate one was like the least provocative of them all. Like it just seemed like just totally nonsensical. Like, we meet in a meadow and exchange vows.
Yeah. Exactly.
I look into her eyes and we touch souls. I mean, it wasn't like that, but it's down that line versus the other one, which was like, I saw his wet lip. You're like, geez, dude. And so like, I would just say in terms of like the tone and the description and the words used, the other ones were much more sexualized, in my opinion. It just felt like if you were just sexually hyperactive in general, those ones would trigger it
just
more
the
than
words
the other ones.
themselves.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a second point to that. It was also actually quieter for some reason.
Oh yeah,
the
for sure.
appropriate one, which is strange, but yeah. So I don't know. I think there was around a 30% response rate that we found. That number sounds right. Maybe between 30 and 40% as far as actually producing a valid measure.
So anywhere between 60 and 70% of our tests we couldn't even use. They were useless. And so we've actually moved on from that examination to a much more practical examination that also isn't as gross, called the ABLE assessment for sexual interest. And that's a computer-based questionnaire that has that they do look at images, no nudity, and they are providing a personal opinion essentially of how sexually interesting or non-interesting the images that they're looking at is.
Right.
Cool. And having that kind of data must just take a little bit of pressure off doing those risk assessments. I know here, like to my knowledge, we don't do polygraphs, and a lot of the offender risk to reassessments are sort of client reports is basically the data they're using. But to have this kind of, high tech stuff to input into those assessments, that sounds like it must really help you guys.
Yeah. And I guess I didn't realize that maybe that was a unique thing. So you don't have anything besides client self-report to help inform your treatment planning?
Like there's questionnaire, and I don't do this work. So I'm just kind of going off what I've collaborated with other therapists and things when I was in child protection. Like we would get the risk assessments, and from what I could see, it was sort of like a 10-session synopsis of their work with the client and what they're reporting and any new instances of criminal behavior. So over a period of time, so you do have kind of their, that pattern to look at, but
okay.
The phallometric testing was rare. We had to get special needs funding for that.
Got you.
Yeah, well, I'd say overall, I don't know how much you're missing out on the phallometric testing. Like it's good that the one case that you had with that provided a valid response, because most of the time we have invalid non-responders. In other words, valid non-responders. In other words, the test was valid. There was no indications of the response interference, and like they weren't attempting to game the system, but then they just didn't respond. And honestly, the conditions aren't really set up for it. I mean, like a lot of times
I would light a candle, kind of set the mood. Yeah.
play some Kenny G.
Kenny G.
Yeah. Like a lot of times these tests would take place in just a normal office with between a partition. And, so, I mean, you can imagine you're like in an office chair with your pants around your ankles, sitting with a button, listening to this thing. You're there, like the guy doing this is right next to you. You probably hear him breathing. And I mean, I don't know. It seems hard to get down with my dogs watching. You know what I mean? Like, I mean,
yeah.
Let alone all that stuff going on. So
it's not the sexiest setup.
Yeah.
Well, it's that, and then so the PPG, the phallometric testing, and the ABLE give us feedback as to like sexual interests, kind of what arouses these dudes. But we don't do a ton with that information other than maybe use it for like safety planning. And if we're looking at doing some type of reunification with minors, you can use that data for understanding that. But like we just don't do a whole lot of arousal reconditioning, or any, I guess I should say. The kind of the most we go with that in treatment is we, when we're talking with these guys about what they fantasize about when they masturbate, we're strongly encouraging them to not like think of their victim while they masturbate, or to think of underage people. But by and large, a lot of the, kind of the aversive conditioning stuff has just not been found to be super effective. And so we get these results, and then it's kind of like, again, for safety planning, it's useful, but in a sense, it's sort of filed away as we focus on risk factors that have a better chance of the client actually moving the needle on and changing. It's tough to change what you're sexually aroused to. Just even if you're super motivated, it's still whatever trips your trigger is probably gunning for life.
Yeah, that kind of was one of the questions I had for you on the episode about porn. You guys talked about helping clients increase their arousal for healthy mates. What does that look like? How do you do that?
Well, that's a good question. Not through pornography. And here's the reason why is, like, I always put it like this. I just say, like, okay, you take the three of us and think about your most recent sexual encounter. You don't have to talk about it because whatever. That's what I'm talking about. But just think about that, and then think if somebody was filming that, and then think if they posted it on Pornhub or something like that. There would be exactly two viewers, and one would be you and the other would be your partner. Nobody would care because our sexual interactions are relatively boring compared to what you're going to find on like a traditional porn channel, right? So while yes, I think so. I don't demonize porn, and I think it's like when you start getting into the morals of pornography, I think it starts taking away from talking to clients about the practical implications that pornography can have in their lives. If you start getting into morals, people tend to tune out. They don't pay attention to these things. Rather, if you just talk about it in a practical matter, like with firearms or something like that, then we can have a real conversation about how this is negatively impacting their lives. And what I would say about the pornography is, it's everything that's designed in pornography is designed to do its job exactly as it's intended to do, which is provide a fantasy, and that's highly sexually, arousing, that you can imagine yourself being in. I mean, I know nobody's watching porn for the plot. And it's completely unrealistic. And I think in a lot of ways, to me, if they're using it and again, nobody's watching it for the plot. So I assume every client of mine who's watching this is using it for masturbation, and they're masturbating, manipulating brain chemistry, and reinforcing images and fantasies that just have no basis in reality. I mean, we've all seen them and they're fun to talk about, the pizza delivery guy, and she's like, did you put extra sausage on that? And then next thing you know, they're off to the races. You know what I mean? But those are sexual encounters that are just not grounded in reality. And in addition to that, I mean, we try to talk to them a lot about, what arousal looks like in terms of their masturbation practices as well. And, we try to talk to them and counsel them. Of course, if you're reinforcing thoughts about, a sexual offense, or of course, children, or anything that involves, weapons or force or anything like that, let's try to get away from that. But, recently there was, an example was, there was it was like a Victoria's Secret, like, I don't know, show that was on at the prison. And a lot of the prison officers, as well as other, I don't know, educational people that were there, were like, no, the sex offenders can't watch this. And I'm like, well, why? Right. What? It'll trigger them to do what? Like, I mean, do you think it's going to be bedlam back in the dorms? Like, what? Trigger them to do what? Masturbate to those images. And I'm like,
of adult women.
So hold on, these are attractive adult women that they're going to go back to their beds and masturbate to in their own minds. Like, okay, I mean, like, good. Like, that's excellent. Like, they're taking what they believe to be an attractive individual, and they're using, because I mean, if you think about sexual fantasies, if I ask a client to describe that to me, I kind of chalk it up to like an ESPN highlight reel of all of our sexual encounters that we've had. And then we kind of, superimpose an image of whoever we're thinking about onto that. And then, and then all the rest of it, right? So that's to me, I don't see a problem reinforcing what would be an otherwise healthy sexual encounter. And the only question sometimes is well, did that person consent? And I say, well, I don't know. Did it appear as if they were enjoying it in the fantasy? To me, that kind of is implied consent. Not to mention, this is a fantasy, like, and yeah, you're probably not hooking up with a Victoria's Secret model, but at least it's your own thoughts that are based on previous sexual experiences that you're now using. And then, hopefully this is going to manifest behaviorally into a real sexual encounter for these individuals. Because I think the best antidote to deviant sexuality is healthy sexuality. And the more of it, the better.
Nice. That's a good point. And, the other thing I learned from that episode that you had mentioned, Mace, was that there's actually a bigger dopamine release from watching pornography than having sex with a human being.
Yeah. So there was...
That's wild.
And part of it is, I think about I think visually again, well, so think about all the senses that are involved when you're watching pornography versus when you're having a normal sexual encounter. A lot of sexual encounters, for the most part, are in the dark, and it doesn't mean that you're not wanting to look at your partner. And this isn't for everybody. I'm saying a lot of them in the dark, and there's
Kenny
not
G playing.
Yeah. Kenny G playing in the background.
That's right.
And not to mention, like, my image of what's happening is really very focused in on this one individual with whom I'm having these relations, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas I can pull up, I don't know, the 5 porn stars going to a frat party and turning into like complete debauchery. Visually, that's incredibly stimulating compared to even some of the, wildest sexual encounters all of us can have with one consensual partner. And then on top of that, it's not as if the models or the stars that are in this are hideous. They're all incredibly attractive. Everybody's, looking good, and their camera angles, it's so manufactured that's why the visual stimulation supports that. And then also, ease of use. There's no like, oh, I'm super tired, babe, I gotta get home to get to bed, or geez, it's getting late, you might need to leave, toots, or however, whatever that conversation goes. It's simple, like click cam, done, and we're out of here. So just the convenience and anonymity and ability to view all those things tend to be what drives those kind of dopamine surges that we see in those.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I wonder too, with COVID, like loneliness, a lot of people at home by themselves, like there's increase of, at least from what I've heard from some of my clients, of going on those cam girl sites where you can actually talk to them. And the OnlyFans sort of blew up throughout the pandemic.
Oh yeah, it did.
Dude, yeah, if you were to manufacture like a globalized high risk situation that would increases the chances for sexual reoffense, like COVID did it. Everybody stays home, financial problems go through the roof, which boosts, these dudes stress through the roof, proximity to potential victims, everybody's cooped up, relationships kind of going to shit. A lot of times when you're on top of each other, even the most committed couples can start to bother each other. And just so like,
especially when you're on top of each other.
It's like tailor-made for there to be some pretty big problems. And I think that, and I'm not the only dude to say this, but I think that a few years from now we're gonna really start to see some of what's been going on this past year, actually kind of manifesting and coming down the pipe, and coming out legally. I'll bet you that we get an uptick in the statistics, unfortunately.
For sure.
Yeah, and I'm curious what you guys have been seeing, and just on the note of porn, my PO buddy had a really good acronym that they use called the CAN rule. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. So he talks about with his clients, sexual offending clients, the CAN rule. So if you're going to be engaging in activity or watching pornography, you follow this CAN. So C is for consent, A is for age appropriate, and the N is for nonviolent. sort of
So
like
consensual, age appropriate, nonviolent.
yeah. So
Real quick on that, like, does Canada not have a problem with offenders looking at pornography?
do they have a problem in Canada?
Yeah, like can sex offenders up there look at porn?
Yep. Yeah, and there's
Oh,
no real
okay.
way to monitor that when they're on probation or anything, but
Gotcha.
just sort of something he teaches, because he does a lot of program delivery and relapse prevention.
That's a good acronym though. And I mean, I don't know if we probably would exercise that. And I think Jeff and I kind of share some thoughts about this is, so porn use, to be clear, I mean, to anybody listening to we know that there's no empirical link between porn use and recidivism. Okay. So that's, porn use is, see, and some people don't even know why they give such a shit about it sometimes. That, like they freak
Moral
out.
stigma.
Well, there's that, but the other thing is so from our perspective, porn use sometimes is a symptom of another risk factor, which does have some empirical research for recidivism, which is sexual preoccupation. So if an individual, see, this is where, because it's for the most part prohibited by all of our clients, and we measure that typically through the polygraph. And basically what we end up doing here is I just say, okay, look, if it's not a problem, then it shouldn't be a problem. What I would say to any person that says, well, yeah, I'm going to face a criminal sanction if I engage in this behavior, and it's clear cut and everybody knows it. And
this is any porn, Mace, like any even consensual, age appropriate, nonviolent porn is totally off the table for.
Well, okay, so you're not going to get in trouble for watching like an R-rated movie with sexual content in it, necessarily.
Not always.
Sometimes, I mean, sometimes it kind of depends. Again, kind of how you're using this, because this harkens back to an actual risk factor that does have some truth to it. Because here's the thing: if I say, okay, Matt, you're going to be put on probation, and guess what? If you look at porn, we're going to violate that probation and send you back to prison, right? Or violate your parole and send you back to prison, or give you some sort of sanction. Okay. Now we can argue and talk about the merits of that argument, and clients, in terms of morals and all that, I say, yeah, I'm not going to argue with you about that, because I'm just saying it's a rule that's in place. Now, if you are so sexually preoccupied that you cannot stop thinking about sex to the degree that you are engaging in a behavior that would otherwise take away your freedom, that's a problem. That could be any behavior, though. I mean, as silly as it is, if somebody said, Mace, you're not allowed to eat Sour Patch Kids anymore, or we're going to send you to prison, I'd figure out a way to give up Sour Patch Kids. I'm pretty confident I would, right? And so I'm saying if that, it could be an symptom of a client being so sexually preoccupied that they would otherwise disregard a rule that's universal and sacrifice their freedom as a result of it. Now that's a problem. Like, to me, that says that is a lack of control over a thought process, some impulse control. Again, we start talking about the health and morals of porn, that it turns into a useless argument at that point, because I more often than not, I'd probably agree with people that, yeah, I mean, so what? I mean, it's people engaging in a completely legal activity, and the vast majority of people who watch pornography don't commit sex offenses, and it's not correlated with risk for recidivism. So what the hell do I care?
Well, and I guess this might be a stretch, but the argument around like helping clients increase the arousal for healthy adult interactions and I don't know, that's probably a stretch, but so it's really black and white there.
Well, are you kind of going the route of like, if we're trying to increase arousal to adult women or adult men, just consensual, whatever, that masturbation through watching CAN level pornography would be a way to increase that? I mean, like, maybe maybe that study's been done. That's what's interesting about one of those questions that you pre-sent to us, like, and we don't have to, we can come back to this later, but just the whole idea of using sex dolls, for the same type of thing. It's one of those, especially like, minor sex dolls. So like, I guess whatever it is, if we're talking about either creating healthy sexual arousal patterns or satiating a deviant need through either, pornography, provided it doesn't turn into an action, or through, a deviantly built sex doll, satiating that drive. Like I really don't know how to think about that. And I can make an argument both ways, and I'm not aware of research out there. It might exist, but yeah, that's weighing on my mind a bit.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I mean, initially I was really ignorant to sex dolls and child sex dolls. My initial thoughts was like, well, they're in their own house, they're not hurting anybody, there's no children there. But then as you kind of get into the sex dolls and how realistic these are, and you can literally customize the facial features, the size of them, their body shape, their skin color. And then you add in like AI and everything else that's going on, and it is pretty disturbing what you can buy. And I guess you guys kind of talked about that on that episode. Like there's a couple different theories. Like there's desensitization, there's the aspect of like there's no consent with a sex doll, there's objectification, and then there's this like distortion of fantasy and reality and all that.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know, it gets really complicated when you get right down to it. I mean, because okay, if you're talking about, like, I don't know, somebody who has their own particular sexual, arousal, and let's say that is to a child sex doll, and let's say that individual goes out and buys that, and then they bring it back to their home and they routinely go to town on it. Okay. If they never have an interaction, I think the real, I guess the real kind of a thing that is where this becomes a problem is when you've already crossed a boundary with the criminal justice system. Like if that guy just kept doing his own business, I'd never meet him, because he'd be doing whatever he's doing with the sex doll. And I assume there's a lot of people who do those things, right? And to the last time I checked, buying a doll like that and doing whatever you want to it is not illegal. Now, when you cross the threshold of now getting into, I've already committed a sexual offense, which is who we work with, and then now our number one objective. A lot of people think that sex offender treatment is about not creating new victims, and that's not true, because we're not treating people that are not in our office. That's not creating victims is first of all a future occurrence that may or may not happen, and not to mention that is taking our interventions and applying them to somebody that's outside of our office. The person that we care the most about is our client who's sitting in front of us, and our objective is to keep him out of the criminal justice system. That's our objective. And so we just have to recognize that whatever his sexual predilections were prior to this led him down a pathway, and who knows what the magic bullet is or the secret sauce is, but there's a total constellation of events that led up to his sexual offense, and we're trying to modify multiple aspects of his lifestyle, because it's not just one thing. To limit it to just he was watching porn and that's what led to it, that would be an oversimplification of everything. And so where we come down on this is, yes, the consent thing never held a whole lot of water with me. I mean, it's kind of like, I sat in a group one time, and they were ragging on this guy that they found a Sports Illustrated magazine in his the swimsuit edition, right? And this is a therapist, and she was really getting down on him that he should have had the models consent to masturbate to them. And I'm like, I was like, I'm pretty sure those models count on you masturbating to them, and that's their paycheck. And I'm not, and not to mention, how creepy would that be? You call up, I don't know, Kathy Ireland, and go, "Hey, Miss Ireland, you mind if I rub on out to you?" Like,
get a restraining order real quick.
It's and not to mention, that's just weird. So that to me is I don't, those, I think if you're I'm not the thought police, and so I think as long as that, again, that the fantasy appears to be consensual in their own minds, awesome. The problem with porn, like I said, is it's an over dramatic representation of what's happening, right? Like when I see like my children watch, I don't know, the Avengers, and they pretend like they're Thor. Okay, well, adults watching porn and trying to like act as if that's the thing, that would be a worry. Not that that's exactly what they do, but it gives them an unrealistic expectation of what's going to happen in the sexual encounter. Not to mention it's incredibly convenient, and their social skills, most of our guys, are dog shit. And that will not help their social skills. They're just going to sit home, and the novelty associated with pornography, the never ending novelty of pornography, and the anonymous, and it's free. If you're paying for porn, you're silly, but like you could just sit home for the rest of your life and never have any social interactions and be just fine. Which is also okay. The one problem that we have is this guy already committed a sexual offense. So he's capable of doing that, and that puts him in a category that's much higher than anybody else who's not committed a sexual offense. And so we take that into consideration. And, you know, Jeff and I have completed guys that told us flat out, you know, I'm going to look at porn when I'm done. Or guys who have looked at porn, and we've kind of said, you know what, I don't think we should hold this guy back from completing, because this just really isn't an issue. There's so many other areas in his life where he's completely functional. Yeah. And so it's not like a killer by any stretch. And we're able to navigate it pretty well. But yeah, it's pretty universally against the rules here, while they're on probation or parole.
And do you guys, I mean, personally, do you agree with that rule? Like that it's universally not okay to watch porn on probation or parole? Like, do you see is there clear benefits or evidence that you guys have seen that's been beneficial for your clients?
Well, it's actually not worded that way, right? I get concerned. So
sexually stimulating material related to my particular deviancy.
Yeah, so that's the language that is used, is sexually stimulating material related to my particular deviancy.
Okay. So there's a connection to their.
Well, here's the thing. It's stated that way. And like, what we're talking about is on their probation agreement, they'll have, 20 different rules they have to abide by. And one of those is I won't consume or possess any sexually stimulating materials according to my particular deviancy, including but not limited to. And then it has this whole list of like computer, internet, text, magazines, ham radio, like all these different methods. and so when it's like, to my particular deviancy, you'd think like, okay, if my sexual offense was with a 12-year-old boy, then I need to not look at pornography with, 12-year-old boys in it. And therefore kind of making the case that it would be okay to look at adult women and kind of go the route that you were talking about earlier, Matt, with reinforcing healthy sexual behaviors. But the thing is, the way that it actually, that's how it's written, but the way that it gets applied is kind of like a universal condemnation of pornography across the board. And here's the thing, like for me, from a programming standpoint, since it's a rule that's put in place by the folks that we have to answer to, as well as the clients, the people we have a contract with, we enforce it, and we don't come at it from the angle, the no porn. We don't come at it from the angle of, the slippery slope argument. We don't come at it from the angle of it's going to make you reoffend. We come at it from the angle that Mace mentioned earlier with, it's the compulsive sexual behavior, sexually preoccupied, and kind of the level of impulse control. And if they can go without looking at pornography, we're able to draw some conclusions that, all right, when it comes to sex, this guy has the ability to pump the brakes, as evidenced by not looking at pornography for X amount of time. He's shown some ability to manage that risk. And so we kind of roll with the rule originally, and I can only speak for myself here. I'll let May speak for himself. Like, I'd be open to that rule relaxing a bit, at least in terms of how much trouble some of these guys can get in when they do look at pornography. Things have loosened up a little bit the last couple of years, but I can think of like dozens and dozens of clients that were looking at age appropriate pornography and ended up back in prison because of it. Mm-hmm. And I would be open to that relaxing.
That relaxing for sure. I'd be totally open to that. And just moving it more towards like a clinically based decision. I understand that sometimes that the parole officers or probation officers need to act in accordance with community safety. Fine with that. I'd be the first to tell you, But that's where I don't know if, I don't know, slipping up and watching Pornhub once is a testament to a lack of community safety. So yeah. And if it got to the point where it were, I mean, we always tell clients, like, we don't hold back violations. They've signed an agreement where we have to report violations. But also for some of these guys, if they get charged with another sexual offense, they in a lot of cases, give them a life sentence, and that's not acting in their best interest. And sometimes kind of pumping the brakes on these things is helpful too. But it should just, in our opinion, be more of a kind of clinically based decision.
Yeah. Well, and further to that, I guess for some clients, I'm sure it's a coping mechanism or self-soothing, and taking a break, I guess, gives them opportunities to build new tools that you guys are teaching them or helping them to learn.
Sure. And we always say, sex should be used for one thing, and that's pleasure. Like, I mean, of course, making babies, but we're saying, if your emotional regulation strategy when you're angry is to masturbate, I get sexual pleasure from that. Or when I'm sad, I masturbate, I feel better. Okay, you're kind of coaching your brain to go down one pathway. And I mean, I'm damned if it's not effective. I'm just saying that sex should be used for pleasure, and that be the end of it. So if you're masturbating for pleasure, awesome, have at it. I mean, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. And that's a big reason why, sex is involved in terms of a relationship, that and celebrating the relationship and all those fun things that people talk about. But, we try to stay away from, I mean, unless a client's really working on that, where they're saying, I don't want to masturbate anymore, and they're kind of determining that for themselves, and we help them out with that. But we're not against it whatsoever. And, porn typically is just fuel for masturbation anyway. So it just, at a base level, I think the real trump card is the fact that they have committed a crime that has victimized another person. And so we have to take that into consideration when we're thinking about them watching porn and some of the implications there. But for the most part, it can be worked around.
And well, Matt, like you were saying, in order to find out if they are using masturbation for a purpose other than pleasure and making babies, if they're using it, to cope with stress or loneliness, often loneliness, then we're not going to fully know that until there's been some abstinence from that behavior, which is kind of what I think you were getting at. And so that rule to create that, no pornography, when clients stick to that and they have some emotional regulation problems crop up as a result of not having pornography as their fallback coping, that allows us as therapists to come in and, give them some shiny new tools to
that's
use.
a huge opportunity for you guys, and
That's
for
right.
them to notice what that gap is doing for them or not doing for them anymore.
That's
And
right.
the other point you guys made was around porn-induced erectile dysfunction, which if there's ever a reason to maybe cut back, that might be it.
That's the one that'll get their motivation.
Yeah. Yeah. There's quite a bit of controversy behind that. The main guy, the proponent of that, Gary Wilson, who's done a lot of research and stuff on that, he just recently died from something or other. I don't know. It's funny. I know another colleague of mine that gets into internet wars with him, and I was like, maybe he died from a broken heart because he was mean to him. But yeah, I've had at least 2 clients with whom I've worked, and that, see, I think I don't know if there's hard and fast science, pardon the pun, that says this for sure is a thing, right? We've referenced it because it was brought up, but I have had anecdotally 2 clients that I've worked with that had that issue, that they had a partner with whom they were attempting to have sex with, and they could not get an erection. And even after they used, one used Viagra and one used Cialis, they still couldn't get an erection. And then once they looked at porn, it worked. Everything was back to normal. So anecdotally, I think it makes sense. And scientifically, I think there's some evidence to support that. I'd say, I don't know exactly what mechanisms are at work at this point. And I think a lot of the research that we've looked at, they're drawing some decent conclusions. I just don't know if they have enough evidence to back up and support exactly what they're saying. There may be some psychological issues, I think, that whether it be anxiety based or whatnot, that they're still driving this and that need to be addressed. And so it might be more of a symptom rather than the cause, but nevertheless, I've seen it in at least 2 of my clients where it's been a major issue.
Yeah.
One of them went back to prison because he
couldn't get an erection.
Yeah, his PO jumps in, hey, freeze. Because he viewed, it wasn't illegal pornography either, but it was not very tasteful, we'll say that. And anyway, he got an 8-year rehearing, so he went back to prison for 8 years. Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate. So yeah, and he had a life tops. I mean, his original offense was pretty egregious, but nevertheless, yeah, it's a problem for sure.
Yeah, one of the things we're shifting in Canada, maybe it's happening everywhere, is the language around child pornography. We're really getting away from calling it porn because that sort of normalizes it. So now it's really known as child sex abuse images or videos.
That's starting to make its way here. Yeah, a little bit. I've heard it a few places, and I mean, I get it. I mean, words do have power, and if people are trying to draw a distinction between, reserving pornography for that would kind of fit in with this CAN acronym that you're talking about, to separate it by calling child pornography, images of child sexual abuse or whatever it is. I can see it. There's a lot. Here's kind of the weird thing for me in our field. There's kind of historically a real scripted way that people need to talk, and we've kind of pushed back against that historically, like for instance,
but he's talking the way clients talk,
the way clients,
the way clients are allowed to talk in therapy.
There you go.
Yeah.
For example, a client that had a consensual sexual relationship with a 15-year-old female, if not for her age, would have been consensual.
So she was cooperative.
Yeah. She would have, the client would have been required to say, I forced my penis into her vagina. So you can't, clients couldn't say things like my victim, because that assumes ownership. It's a person that I victimized, and those types of things. And there's a million other examples that I could give to you. And that's been something that I've pushed back against. I feel like scripted treatment just turns people into really good parrots.
Are you like kind of interrupting them as they're talking and reframing it for them, like in this?
I've never seen a smooth way that happens. Typically, the client will be maybe in the middle of explaining, whatever it is. Maybe they're giving a disclosure of their offense or just talking about something, and the therapist that then cut in and interrupt the client and make them rephrase it, lest they be removed from the program for not using the right series of words. I found it's more disruptive than anything. And again, clients just learn to tell you what you want to hear. Doesn't make for really a genuine experience. And so I've gotten away from worrying about having them say the exact right thing. I get this one though. I don't mind the difference between child pornography and images of child sexual abuse.
And part of, I think also the reason we've gotten away from that, like, hey, only tell me the things I want to hear, is also because I think it makes it difficult to measure progress. Right. Like, I mean, yeah, they say crazy shit. Well, of course. I mean, that's why they're in. If they were only going to say the right things and do the right things, why the hell are they in therapy? Like that doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. So they're here. They're here to have, within reason. I mean, they can't just murder somebody next to them. Like, well, that's why he's in therapy. Like that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that they're going to make mistakes. But 6 months from now, my hope would be he's talking about those things in a different way. But I wouldn't be able to measure that, because and I've seen this happen, they'll get threatened. They're like, Jimmy, if you say it like that again, then you're kicked out of this program. You're excused from group today. Now go home and think about what you did. And then they come back the next time and they say it exactly as it was intended. But the problem with that is all I've done is do a power play to you and really manipulated you into telling me what I want to hear. You don't really believe that. Like, you're just doing it and you're like, oh, okay, this guy's an asshole and he's threatening to kick me out of this program unless I do X, Y, and Z. not super effective. But the only criticism I'd have on some of these things, because like with youth, they don't call it like they've gotten away from like they've turned it got into sexual behavior problems, and then it turned into, I think nowadays it's maladaptive sexual behaviors. Let's just make them shorter. Like,
Yeah, that's a mouthful.
So it went from child porn to child sexual abuse. Like, that's like 2 more syllables. That's like, how can we get it shorter? Like, just make it one word, like
bad porn.
Yeah, corn. Corn. Yeah, I don't know, just being lazy there. But yeah, that's the only thing, is sometimes I catch myself, and hopefully I think as a professional field, child sexual abuse or images of child sexual abuse is much more descriptive of what's actually happening there, because even pornography, traditionally a lot of people think about video, and the bulk of the child pornography is not video, it's images that people have, so I'd say it's worthwhile to move away from that statement. I've certainly worked on that. All my assessments typically say things like that too.
Well, and as you guys are talking about kind of the scripted protocols and sort of being really uptight about language, it makes me think of a client I had, and I just have kind of a generalized practice. So sometimes I'll get somebody come in, say, I have anxiety. And in this case, it's like I'm depressed. And then as we get going, it's like, well, actually, I've been, exposing myself sexually to people. And I'm kind of like in the middle of, work with them. So I'm having to consult with other trained, folks like yourselves. And one of the things I found by just kind of providing that open space that I would to most clients is that's typically, at least with this client, where I would discover a lot of his cognitive distortions, where there was just this open forum, and he's telling me, like they like it when I expose myself. And then as we kind of dig into that, it's like, well, why do they like it? And he said, well, because they're looking at it. Right. And so like giving them that room to kind of just talk, and this is an individual practice, but I imagine in groups too, you get those cues where you're like, okay, well, that's something we want to come back to. There's a distortion.
How open are we talking though? Like, did he expose himself to you, Matt?
Not to me personally. I didn't fit the demographic.
No, but what you're talking about is precisely what we're trying to do. You limit your ability to measure those cognitive distortions if you limit your language that a client can say or not say in those sessions. And then if you do that, you are basically putting up a barrier for any of the interventions that you need to put into place, and also helping them generate replacement thoughts that are a little bit more balanced for those things. So I mean, the gentleman you're talking about, they are looking at it, because I've had exhibitionists who said the exact same thing, and and I'm like, well, so is there another way of looking at it? Yes, they're looking at it. Yes, it's exciting, but they're probably looking at it because this is sensational. More than likely because you're a stranger, they're disgusted. And is that a better way? Can I balance those thoughts out? Which is exactly what we don't want to have them think the opposite, because that's just silly. Telling somebody this isn't exciting at all. This is 100% harmful to other people. Well, I don't know. I mean, it is exciting. That's why people are doing it. But can we balance that out with some more, realistic replacement thoughts that are actually going to move the needle to motivate you not to do those things? And if you don't provide that open space, then they won't talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just a quick aside here, how much time do you guys want to do? Like 10 more minutes, or what's your thoughts?
Yeah. Sure. Whatever you need. Mm-hmm.
I kind of wanted to get into just talking about trauma, the intersection with trauma, sexual offenders, and just kind of understand a little bit of the nuts and bolts of the approach that you guys use in your individual work. So I guess maybe first off, what have you guys found in your work in terms of the clients that you have that are sexual offenders or that have been, and their trauma history or maybe lack thereof? Do you find a connection?
I couldn't give you a percentage, but it's pretty dang high, that they meet some clinical threshold for, dealing with trauma. And, it's kind of the usual circumstances that we'd expect, childhood sexual abuse, physical abuse, witnessing domestic violence, a lot of those life history factors that are common. And one that we might be a little more hidden, that what we've seen a lot of is people that have been to prison, when they get out of prison, they have some trauma from the experience of being incarcerated, and it looks a little different, manifests different, and sometimes it's not something that is easily identifiable. But yeah, that's been, I guess, I don't know if unique would be the term, but I'll use a more unique form of trauma specific to these guys that are coming through the system. And our treatment approach has shifted and changed and adapted over the years that we've been a business. And I mean, we once upon a time we had an entire treatment level devoted specifically to trauma. And yeah, I don't know, it's trauma focused. Cognitive behavioral therapy is it's pretty effective. I'm not personally trained in EMDR. We have a few therapists that are. I still don't get why that works.
Witchcraft.
Yes, apparently it works. Yeah, it seems crazy, but the research shows it's legit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's definitely a component to what we're doing.
Yeah. There was a study that was published by and hopefully I'm not butchering this here, but it was published by the Department of Justice, and they had estimated that around 65% of the clients that are entering into a program like ours have also experienced some form of sexual abuse themselves. Now the trauma component probably a little bit higher than that, because that would be all forms of trauma, and that was obviously in their sample. So I mean, extrapolate that how you will. But in terms of our approach, we certainly, traditionally, it's always been kind of looked at like old school therapy was like, we don't talk about your trauma. We don't talk about your issues. You're here for what? And that doesn't do much good, right, because it doesn't really dial into the reasons why they committed their offense in the first place. So we've gotten away from that in the past, I don't know, 15 plus years or so, that, yeah, this is a crucial component to, again, our objective is we're trying to keep these guys from further engaging in high risk behaviors that are further involving them in the criminal justice system. And a side effect of us being successful is that they're not committing new sexual offenses. So yes, no more victims is a result of what we do, but it's not our goal. That's just a side effect of us being successful with our clients. And part of that is addressing whatever they bring to the table, which is sometimes trauma.
Dude, I'd forgotten about old school treatment, having that idea that you don't get to work on your trauma. You're here because you traumatized someone else. Take care of that in your own time.
Right.
That really was the philosophy for the longest time. It still is, and I'm sure with some providers.
Well, I've
just,
done
a bit short-sighted.
Bit of research on the old school methods, and it looks like it's sort of like shame based.
Oh yeah.
And I guess so you guys do get into their trauma history then, and you make those connections, and like what a great opportunity, especially if they're not really understanding the impact on the victim, to go back to when they were a victim.
Yeah,
I guess.
Right.
And
it's something that we screen for in our initial assessment. We have just doing a typical assessment, and some of the LEC.
The LEC 5, which is the Life Events Checklist 5,
PCL,
and the PCL-C, which is that's the post-traumatic checklist civilian. So those are ones that put out by the Veterans Administration in the United States, and those are good measuring sticks as to so trauma is kind of tricky though, because I mean, it's kind of a fun word in our field these days, are you trauma informed and all this stuff. And, yeah. And like, I'm sure, I assume you guys have to do continuing education up there at CUs. Okay. And I go to conferences all the time, and I'll hear somebody say, if all of us took the ACE test right now, then we would, however many people, well, the ACE is the Adverse Childhood Events Checklist. And well, yeah, life sucks. I mean, welcome. Yeah, we've all been there. So all of us have something, but it's not just that. Like, we have to say, do you have a history of it? And then do you have symptoms associated with that history that are at least within the last 30 days? And are those symptoms causing an impairment? That's what we really dial into and try to figure out. And so our work really asks the question is, did that history and symptoms and impairment have something to do with their offense? Or is it having something to do with currently impairing them, that we need to address? And if so, then we address it, but if they've just simply had hard lives, which a lot of them have, but have no real symptoms right now, then we keep walking, and we kind of move on to what is more prevalent and driving the risk in that person's life. But if trauma is it, then that's it.
Gotcha. Okay. That's interesting. So high prevalence of your clients that have been traumatized, at least. I guess we've all had the ACEs at least scoring on somewhere on there, but likely higher for those clients.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you have going up there? How do you guys address trauma?
Well, I mean, in our practice, we're a private practice. We're all EMDR certified clinicians.
Oh, yeah. So
Yeah, so we primarily, that's our main approach. Secondary approach, I guess, for myself is emotion focused therapy. So, typically we're doing attachment and trauma history within the first, 3-4 sessions, and really starting to target some of those things that are affecting them now. Not for everybody though. Like there's people that just want to learn anger management strategies or anxiety tips and stuff for anxiety, depression, stuff like that. So
Right.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by the research with EMDR and the efficacy of it and at one point or another, like I've gotten into this with Jeff before about talking about research and all these things and kind of proving points. And at one point or another, I'm just like, yeah, man, it's a solid therapeutic practice. And then anytime we joke and call it witchcraft, but it's probably just because we're too dumb to do it. Like, but no, the ones who are trained, our clinicians who are trained, the clients swear by it, and it's had some really good research. So what's the basic theory behind it, like as to why the movement and how that, is it, because I've read things that it's kind of like gets to the end, it's like ultimately we don't really know, and I'm like, but is there some good science behind it as to what's happening there?
Yeah, the way I kind of explain it, this is the quick Coles notes, is that typically when something really upsetting happens, traumatic happens, it overwhelms the brain's capacity, the ability to kind of process and put that information, store it properly, and typically kind of gets stuck in the right side of the brain, very emotionally driven. A lot of negative beliefs are developed. Like, my parents got divorced when I was 6. If only I would have gotten along with my sister more, maybe it wouldn't have happened, right? So that self-blame or shame, whatever it is, stuck in the right side, it lacks a lot of the logic from the left side of the brain. So the bilateral, whether it's eye movements or we use a lot of the buzzers now, especially with COVID, it's helping to reconnect the right and the left side of the brain, similar to the what's happening in our REM cycle of sleep.
I didn't know that's what happened with REM cycle.
Yeah. So we're naturally processing events and stuff from the day and our week, but with trauma, it just overwhelms the REM cycle. It just can't process it, can't digest it. So the other components, so it does incorporate CBT. There's a lot of mindfulness elements to it. It's quiet, so you're doing these 30-second sets approximately, and you're not talking to the client, and they're just inside noticing all the things that are happening. And then when you stop the set, you're trying to get them to talk about, what do you feel in your body, or what kind of emotions are you noticing, or what thoughts are you having. So you're also trying to activate 3 main parts of the brain at the same time, to help them to work through, process, make sense of, and ultimately desensitize those images and memories that are so upsetting that they're used to avoiding altogether.
So the right and left hand side of the brain. What's the other one? The third one?
Well, sorry, the 3 parts, the frontal cortex with your thoughts, and then limbic system with your emotions, and then brainstem with kind of your body sensations.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's is it true? I heard once upon a time that the developer of that came up with the idea because she was had her own sets of trauma, and as she was walking and looking at the sidewalk and the things that she was like the slats in the sidewalk, like as you're walking through them, that she noticed when she thought about these things and looked at those images and her eyes were moving, that she felt better about that. Is that true?
Really?
That's true. That's true. I don't
Oh,
know
yeah,
about
wow.
the sidewalk
Okay.
piece, but I know she was walking and looking left, right, and
Yeah.
And I think
That
knew
is
it.
an observant lady. Holy crap.
Yeah.
I would never put that together.
Yeah.
That like, that's got to give her credit.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I heard that. I don't even know where I heard that from, but yeah. Okay. Well, that's
So,
cool.
Yeah. So, but just kind of looking at the time here, and
Sure.
I appreciate you guys talking to me and going through all this.
This was fun, man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
it's
got to do
great.
this again.
Absolutely. I'd love to close with these questions. I think a lot of people appreciate these kind of tips, especially from seasoned, vets like you guys. You guys see a lot of shit, a lot of hard, and hear about a lot of stuff. What do you do to manage, prevent, mitigate burnout, vicarious trauma?
Well, so I don't really know how to explain this first off, but like, for whatever reason, when I hear crazy stuff or something horrible or horrific abuse, or, a client does something really messed up, I don't have to consciously switch my mind off of work mode and go into home mode. I'm lucky, maybe. Like it's never, obviously, I can react to what I'm hearing and acknowledge, horrific abuse when it occurs, but it's never been, I can't relate to the idea of taking stuff home with me, and I don't know why, but just maybe in a more general sense, I need exercise anyway to function optimally. My wife knows if I missed a day or two at the gym, whether it's, on the mat doing jujitsu or lifting weights or running, preparing for a freaking trail run. I get grumpy. I get just kind of downcast. I need to move. It's like I have a very sedentary job, and it's like all this crap builds up just from sitting, and I've got to go, blast that out through, doing some heavy deadlifts or something,
Yeah. And so that question comes up often, Matt, and I answer it very much the same way. So I'm not a, jujitsu expert like Jeff or a practitioner, but I do a lot of endurance events. So
Ironman triathlete here.
Right. And ultra marathons and a lot of, and I lift routinely too. Same thing. And if I don't go to the gym, now, Jeff and I we're a couple meatheads, of course. So it's different. So the one thing I'd say to that is I'm not encouraging people to do those things, because that seems overwhelming, and not that we're like special. I'm just saying that's our thing. And I think the fact that we do it so much and so passionately speaks to the level of self-care that's necessary to work in this field. So I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's, if it's yoga or meditation or whatever it is. You need a healthy dose of that on a routine basis in order for those things to do. So I think it's incumbent on everybody working in this field to find whatever that self-care strategy is, and you need to do it. You need to do it often and do it routinely, because if not, I think you're leading to the point where, the work can be overwhelming. The other thing too is I say you have to be humorous about this stuff. Like when Jeff and I joke around, if we're in like a public setting with other people, it's like gets dark fast, and it's hilarious to us, but other people not so much. But we have to keep a sense of humor about what we do. So that's the other big component of this, because if you don't have that, then it's just, and also lastly, know your limitations. This may not be the right field for you. And if you know that you just don't work well with felons, please do them and you a favor and just work with a different population. It's, that would be my advice.
That's solid advice. And outside of that, is there any advice, tips, wisdom you'd give to new social workers that are considering going into forensic psychotherapy?
I would say, it's not difficult to, dip your toe in the water, so to speak, and get an internship within these institutions, because there's not as much of a dichotomy in terms of talent in this therapeutic field than there is in any other discipline, in clinical discipline, in my opinion. this is either the island of misfit therapists or people who passionately care about doing this work. So you have a group of therapists who otherwise have burned bridges or just don't do well in other populations. Of, maybe I'll give sex offenders a try. And then they come here and they don't do well, right? Or you have, what we fancy ourselves to be as people who genuinely care about this population in terms of making our community safe and helping them become productive members of society and so on and so forth. So you're going to know early on, if you can get into this field early on with a little bit of experience, whether or not you love it or hate it. And if you've determined for yourself that this isn't for me, then that would be a good mechanism to kind of tell yourself, okay, maybe I ought to get my energy in a different lane and go that route.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
There's no book to read. I mean,
right.
That's, you just dip your toe in the water and see how it is.
Yeah, that's I 100% endorse that. And the one other, I guess, in the same vein, and not everybody's going to have the ability to do this, but when, we kind of going back to the beginning of the podcast, we were talking about some of those line staff jobs at group homes, and I didn't start as line staff at the group home that we were talking about, but I was called a tracker, which is a lot more ominous sounding than it really is, a mentor. Basically working with,
sounds like a bounty hunter.
It does, yeah. And kind of working with tough populations from a non-clinical perspective before getting into the clinical perspective made me a better therapist. I think that, therapists that, let's just say, started out working as a line staff where you're 8 hours a day with some, group of knuckleheads, it's going to give you invaluable experience that'll so much better inform your understanding of the clinical side of it once you get into it. A lot of times therapists that go from their job as a photographer or whatever right into being a therapist are missing a big chunk of, I think, what it takes to have the mindset and maybe the talent even to do that line of work.
Yeah.
So getting in kind of on the ground level, I guess, if that's an option that's doable for you, would be smart.
That's awesome advice. And I guess just to close it off, Guerrilla Social Work Podcast, that's just one offshoot of what you guys do. How can people find out about Alpha Counseling if they want to touch base or consult with you or learn more about what you guys do? What's the best bet?
Yeah, we have a very modest website. You can find it at utahsbesttherapy.com. So that's our website. Of course, if you just Googled Alpha Counseling, who actually inserts websites anymore? Like, when was the last time you typed www?
Yeah,
like
HTTP.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Nobody. So if you just search Alpha Counseling, and then our contact information is there. Of course, our emails are really easy. Jeff@alphacounseling.net, Mace@alphacounseling.net, and then of course you can find us. We have a YouTube channel and Guerrilla Social Work Podcast. Yeah, GUERRILLA, not the gorilla, even though we have a picture of a gorilla in the background.
It's very misleading.
Yeah.
Adult picture though.
Yeah. Pretty good stuff.
Yeah, great marketing on the website. I love that. Mace, you have no bio. Jeff's making up.
Yeah. What does Mason say? It's something like
a one-liner. It's straight.
I did that deliberately. It was funny. There was a therapist one time, because I think when we did a bio on me, we just misunderstood. Like, I think we just misremembered the years.
Oh yeah.
So this is how silly it was. Is we had put that I had done 13 years of work versus 11 years of work, and one of our colleagues found that and was like, this is fault, like you were lying. And I'm like, well, hold on. First of all, who cares? I mean, it's a minor mistake. So then I was like, okay, just put I'm a therapist. That's it. So ever since then I was like, and it's actually I was inspired to Jeff's wife, because I was asking her about, she does my hair. Shout out to the Look Salon. She told me, I asked her, I was like, hey, how come I never see advertisements for Redken shampoo and conditioner. And she says, this product speaks for itself. It doesn't need advertising. So I was like, huh.
There it
This
is.
product speaks for itself. I don't
That's
need
awesome.
advertising. So that's why my bio is only one line.
That's cool.
I got much more, but I don't put it on there.
Leave some to the imagination.
Yeah. Less history, more mystery, baby.
Oh man, well, it's great talking to you guys. Thanks again for coming on the show. And
Yeah.
Of course, man.
You just need to reciprocate. We'll hit you up and do some talk about EMDR if you're cool with that.
sure, yeah, we could talk about group homes all day too, I'm sure.
Nice.
Hell yeah. That'd be
I got a
awesome.
couple stories I spared you today that I could get into.
Yeah, that's
Beautiful.
awesome.
Yeah, the conversation went smooth. I'm sure there's plenty more content we can churn out between the three of us.
100%.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Matt. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Well, I'm hoping to put this out next, like a week from Friday.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not great. What's that?
I was just gonna say, how do I access it?
Yeah, I'll send you. So I'm not great with social media, but I'm trying to get better. So I usually kind of pump it up the week before. I'll pull out some quotes and stuff, and I'll send it all to you guys beforehand. You can have a look, and then I'll send you the link. It's on Spotify, Apple, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Just called Social Work Me is the podcast.
Okay.
Easy enough.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
But I'll send
Are
you.
you? Yeah,
Thanks,
Matt.
man.
Are you okay? I was going to ask you this. I don't think we touched on it, and totally cool if not. Are you okay if we post this episode on our site as well?
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. That'd be perfect. Yeah. We'll just
Do you
because
do you want the file or?
if you can, that would be awesome. That would be so good. And we would, if you have the recording and the audio, then I could upload it to our YouTube, and then we, of course, would pump your site to your podcast. We could just help each other out that way and do some cross marketing
Sounds
for
awesome.
our audiences. Okay.
So I'll
man.
send you the video too.
Yeah, and then I'll post it on our YouTube channel. And then if you're going to post it on YouTube, I could probably gank it off YouTube. And then,
I don't even have YouTube channel.
okay.
So I'll send you there's a website I use for sharing big files.
Yeah.
It's free. So I'll just send you the whole video and the audio through that.
Yeah.
We'll make sure we pump your stuff up.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
I'll put out a good intro, and then I'll get it on the YouTube channel, and then that way, yeah, you can cross market that as well.
Awesome. That's great.
Okay. Cool, brother.
All right,
All right,
boys.
thanks a lot, man.
Okay.
Appreciate you.
All right, guys.
Yeah.
Okay,
Take
take
it
it
easy.
easy. See ya.
Yeah.